the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Welcome to another episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. I'm so excited to sit down today with Aditi Mohapatra, who is the Vice President of Global Social Impact and Sustainability at Expedia Group. We talked about all sorts of stuff, from what inspired her to join a travel company in the middle of a global pandemic, to how Expedia Group is thinking about its role in the sustainability and social impact space, and incentives and how they inform Aditi's own thinking about the change we need to see and how we make it. I just know you're going to enjoy my conversation with Aditi as much as I did. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. I am so excited to sit down with a woman that I have long admired, Aditi Mohapatra. She is leading sustainability and ESG and impact at Expedia Group, and she's just such an interesting and exciting person. Aditi, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Liz. It's so great to be here.
So excited to have you here, clearly. So I would love if you wouldn't mind briefly introducing yourself to our listeners, and we'll go into like your full how you came to be here story in a bit, but would love to hear just a little bit high level of who you are and what's going on in your world.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Aditi Mohapatra. I've been working in the field of corporate responsibility, sustainability, ESG, all those things for the last 15 years. I recently took on a new role to oversee global social impact and sustainability at Expedia Group, which has been an interesting and exciting new set of challenges and lots of learning for me. And I just really have dedicated my career to working at this intersection of corporations and society from lots of different angles. And yeah, there's just so much happening in this space. It's a really exciting time to be in this field, and I'm excited to dig in with you today.
Yay. Yes, excited to dig in too. And I often open the podcast with like the biggest question. I think it's always so interesting to hear what women who are doing this work, what's top of mind. If you could change one thing about the world, and it can be anything, it's like the magic wand crystal ball question, what would be the one thing that you would want to change about the world today?
Yeah, it is a big question, particularly when you look at the world and just the status of kind of social unrest, the status of the planet, the status of inequity, of all of these different dimensions. And it is, it's just a tough moment, and it's a tough question to reflect on. But, I think when I do think about it, it is like, I think I would change kind of the incentives, like the incentive structure, how we're thinking about what success, what the kind of outcomes that we're seeking together as a society look like. And I say that because I think, a lot of us or a lot of individuals are really just, can't comprehend and take on some of these long-term, really systemic challenges because they just feel too far out. They're really focused on near-term, short-term outcomes and outputs, and don't really understand how those kinds of trends and crises ultimately impact them in the near term. I think we're also just trained, all over the place to just look at lots of other metrics for success, like degrees earned, years of education, salary, promotions, and within an organization, all sorts of different KPIs that we set out. And it just feels like we're always reaching towards very specific kinds of outcomes that don't take into account kind of the interconnected nature and relationship that we have across society, how we need to be thinking about and accounting for some of these wider challenges that we're all entirely connected to, but don't really have an orientation to work towards. And so I think if we could change incentives to look at them as a little bit more nuanced and look at them as a little bit more interconnected, I would hope that we would be able to understand our role in driving change in a lot of these kind of society wide challenges. So how is that for a big answer to your big
Mm,
question?
I love that. Well, I feel like you have an economist's heart, as do
I
I.
do. You know, my undergraduate degree is in economics, so I think that's maybe where that comes from. Yeah.
Totally. I'm like, your inner economist is showing, but I love it. No, I think that's such a beautiful answer. And I think, yeah, that was one of my biggest takeaways when I studied economics. It's like people respond to incentives and the incentives we have in our current system. And as you alluded to, both like at the organization level, at the policy level, at the individual level, like they feel broken. um,
Hmm.
and how can we reconfigure those to account for how interconnected everything is? No big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah. No big deal.
I love it. Well, I would love to hear a little bit more about Expedia Group, changing topics a little bit. I know it's so much more than Expedia. So would you be willing to tell us a little bit about like everything that entails?
Yeah, and I think, now 9 months in, I have a little bit more visibility into answering that question. I'm not sure I fully appreciated all of it when I started either. And so I'll try to do it in as simple a way as I can. But Expedia Group is, one of the world's largest online travel companies and has this mission to power global travel for everyone everywhere. And so that means, a portion of what we do, of course, is this kind of ecosystem of marketplaces that we host. And so those are a different portfolio of about 24 different consumer facing brands. I think the ones that are most well known are Expedia itself, hotels.com, and Vrbo. And I think some people may still know that as VRBO, but that's Vrbo. And those are some of the, larger kind of consumer facing brands that we host. And then we have this large other side of our business, which is really about being a travel technology company and a travel technology platform where we can use our supply, our technology solutions to power our business partners and allow them to meet travelers where they are and help them kind of have the technology solutions to help travelers that they connect with plan and book their travel experiences as well. So we have a very large kind of B2B side of our business, which interacts with all different hotels and cruise lines and airlines, and then this technology component that powers other travel sites, and then of course the marketplaces like Expedia, Hotels.com, and Vrbo as well. So lots of different kind of pieces to that group.
Wow, absolutely. And so much travel related technology. I didn't realize that Verbo is the correct way of saying VRBO. That's good to know.
Yes, yes. I learned that during my interview where I was speaking about VRBO and was corrected to know that it's actually called Vrbo.
Well, I just learned a couple weeks ago that GIF is GIF. It's like officially GIF.
Yeah.
So learning new things all the
Learning
time.
new things. Yes.
Well, I'd love to hear a little bit about what your current day to day looks like managing. And correct me, like, what is the current term of art at Expedia Group? Is it impact, ESG, corporate responsibility, sustainability, all of the above?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of the above. And I think depending on, who you intersect with throughout the company, they have kind of embraced a different term. My formal title for my role is Vice President, Global Social Impact and Sustainability. And so those are the kind of, two pillars that I'm kind of working towards, but it is all encompassing. And so the role itself and the remit is quite big. It includes all of our philanthropy, all of our employee volunteering work, our community engagement at large, human rights, of course, climate and sustainability, social impact. So all of those different dimensions, feed into this role. And I think that, these roles and these titles are kind of just structured in different ways. I think depending on when the role was created, the kind of intention behind it. And I think, initially for Expedia Group, there were really just two main areas of focus that needed to kind of get built out. And that was our social impact work as well as our sustainability work. And I think there was internally just a little bit of hesitation around the term corporate social responsibility, where I think, a lot of organizations have shifted away, of course, from that kind of language. And so thinking a little bit more about kind of where we could be from a proactive perspective. But then I will say in a lot of my internal engagement with colleagues, we do talk about ESG increasingly as, of course, we're intersecting more and more with the investor community and their interests and expectations of Expedia Group as well.
Awesome, amazing. It's been so interesting. I know you know and have watched even longer than I have as the terms of art have evolved, but that makes a lot of sense why those two pieces would be called out explicitly in your title. And would love to hear a little bit more about what does the vice president of global social impact and sustainability do on an average day? I know what drew me to this field initially was just the sheer variety of things that could land on your plate
Yeah.
on a given Wednesday. I would love to hear a little bit more about that if you can share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, for Expedia Group and where the company is today, I think, right now my role has been all about setting out strategic direction. And really, that means taking stock of kind of all the work that's been done to date, getting a really deep understanding of the intersections of travel and tourism with sustainable development. And we could do a whole episode on that, because there's just a ton there, and I've done a lot of learning in that space. And so understanding where we've been today, understanding our impacts, and then, of course, understanding the multitude of stakeholders that we have to deliver for. And I think that's been one of the things that I've, been challenged by, but, thankfully challenged by. So, there's employees with their expectations, and that's been a hugely important kind of stakeholder community, of course, for us. There's investors, which are regularly, moving the needle on kind of expectations of companies and their ESG performance. Regulators, which have been incredibly active, of course. Civil society, our business partners. And as I said, we have business partners across every dimension of travel and tourism. And so that's flights, hotels, car rentals, cruise lines, destinations themselves. So both their expectations of us, but then also so many opportunities to partner and how we drive their priorities forward as well. And then, of course, travelers, travelers at large, and what are travelers interested in, and how are we delivering value for them? And so there's all these different stakeholders that a role like mine has to be able to deliver value for, which is, unique, of course, within a corporate setting, right? So, of
Mm-hmm.
course, those colleagues that are in marketing and brand are really just oriented on the traveler experience and are really thinking about kind of that unique stakeholder set mindset. And I think, people on the people team are really thinking about employees deeply. And of course, in this role, it's all of the above, and creating a strategy and creating strategic priorities that deliver value for all of those different stakeholders. So that has been a real focus of mine in the first few months as I've gotten going, which has been, challenging, because all of those communities don't speak the same language. All of those communities don't have the same priorities. But you still have to kind of cut through all of that and find space that, again, is impactful and meaningful for all of those. So that's been a big priority. Getting the team in place has been a big priority. We are building out a team, hiring new expertise in-house. And I think, initially that was just one of the things that I think, was really important to me was, what is this team going to do? How are we going to be built, and what is our role going to look like within the company? And I think, we've come around to where a lot of other, I think, teams like this have it within companies, but really to be that center of excellence and to be able to be kind of subject matter experts and partner with the rest of the business to help achieve a lot of the really ambitious objectives that we'll be putting out, and really serving as a center of excellence. But to do that, we need to have a lot of subject matter expertise, right? We have to bring in kind of the in-depth experts on climate and sustainability. We have to bring in the technical expertise on economic empowerment. We have to bring in the expertise around inclusion, diversity, and equity. We have to bring in all of those really in-depth experts to be able to partner again with the rest of the business to execute kind of on our vision. So setting out the strategic direction, building out the team. And then I think the next big phase of work will really be integration across the business and, looking at, building out that network of champions, which are so crucial for roles like these to be able to be successful, getting that kind of buy-in, getting that kind of support. I've been really grateful for, all of the support that I've already had to date. There's been so much enthusiasm throughout the company about this work. Maybe no surprise there. I think everybody, wants to be able to do more and work for a company that's doing more. So there's been lots of enthusiasm and support, but building some more of that integration in structurally, turning back to incentives where we started, getting some of these metrics and KPIs integrated into and across the business. So that's the kind of next phase of work that needs to happen. And then on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of just internal employees asking for information about what we can do. I was, earlier today, I kicked off our Earth Month content for Expedians and hosted a webinar where we're trying to just bring greater awareness and understanding of these issues of sustainability, how they intersect with travel and tourism to our employees. Because again, our team will never be able to be big enough. So as much as possible, we can raise awareness across the business and get others activated to do their part to really move the needle on these issues. That's obviously going to just bring more success to the company overall. So phase one, strategic direction, building out the team, and then really this next phase is about kind of integration and getting the whole company kind of moving in this direction.
Uh, Absolutely. Well, it's so exciting, and such a massive undertaking, I imagine,
Yeah.
at a company of this size. And also, I can think of no one better qualified to put all the pieces in place and really think strategically about these issues and challenges and opportunities. Um, but would love to hear if you're willing to share in as much detail as you're comfortable with. How did you get to be here today? And really, the invitation is to take up space and tell your story. You can go back if you want to go back to your econ undergrad degree. Permission granted, but wherever makes the most sense, would love to hear in some color about your career journey to this point.
Yeah, sure. So, I've actually been in this space of, again, corporate responsibility or sustainability, and for about 15 years, which is, quite a while at this stage. And I came around to it really out of graduate school. So I won't go quite back to undergrad, but in graduate school, I went to go get my MBA really because I needed 2 years to figure out what I wanted to do. And, an MBA is a flexible enough degree. You can kind of go and spend time and just learn, and then also explore and meet people and hear about different career paths and different career journeys. And so I went to DC to get my MBA and met a lot of very interesting people, participated in different career panels where one day there was a career panel around sustainable and responsible investing. And I think at that time it was still called socially responsible investing, SRIs. It's quite a long time ago. And a company called Calvert was on the panel talking about just this new dimension of investing where you could align your values with your financial investments. And I just thought it was so smart. And, the panel was asking questions about just the role of business in society, the responsibility of businesses to tackle issues like childhood obesity to, environmental degradation, to all of these different kind of complex issues, and just what the role and expectations of business were in that space. And that was just, sometimes that just happens, that spark kind of happens. And for me, it just was so intellectually curious. I was so intellectually curious about it and stimulated by those discussions that, I sought to get a summer internship at Calvert, and I was able to, and then spent the next 9 years working in Calvert as the field of what is now known as ESG investing really evolved and changed and grew so much in terms of its level of sophistication, as well as the level of interest in the field. And I really had a lot of different roles during my time at Calvert. I did a lot of work which is focused on research to start, and just read through a lot of CSR reports, a lot of proxy statements, to understand kind of how companies were setting out policies, what kinds of programs they had in place, and what their disclosures and transparencies look like to demonstrate their actual performance across a range of different issues. I was focused on the technology sector in particular, and it was just such an interesting experience, both doing a lot of that research and then setting out kind of the expectations from an investor perspective of what was necessary to be considered a responsible investment. I also did a lot of engagement directly with financial advisors and then therefore their investors on, making the case that there was a world in which you could align your investments with, your values. And just seeing that spark so much interest for so many people, I think, it's a precursor, of course, to where we are today, and just the heightened expectations from every stakeholder. But it was really great to get that kind of engagement as well, and to understand how people felt about those kinds of connections and their willingness to really, put their investments where kind of their values were. And that was still new at that time. And then I got to do a lot of shareholder advocacy work, which I felt like was such a smart and engaging form of advocacy. So, we used our position as investors within companies to advocate for change. Um, and I got to go to annual general meetings and talk to boards of directors about, why I thought that they should increase board diversity was a big issue that I was personally focused on during my time at Calvert. And that was all just, tremendous engagement and tremendous kind of foundational work to the rest of my career. And I really, I think now just being where I am, I think the change in the investor community has been the driver of so much of what we've
Mm-hmm.
seen activated across corporate America. So I'm super proud of my time kind of getting started in that space. And I continue to think it's just such an important part of the overall mix of, what we need to see kind of happen. So spent quite some time there. And then, as you know, I spent the next, 9 years about at BSR, at Business for Social Responsibility. For those who are not familiar, it is a business network of mostly large Fortune 500 companies, and we work with those companies to improve their sustainability practices through consulting and collaboration and research and other things. And I started in DSR's San Francisco office, working with the technology sector, where I got to partner with wonderful people like Liz, and really, help advise tech companies on sustainability strategies. And what a fun industry to get to work with at that time, and just so much, again, change and lots of new ways of thinking, which was so dynamic and so great. And really going into, conversations with really, of course, some of the largest tech companies, and where there was an openness to think about doing things differently, and really, an aversion to kind of this world of corporate responsibility standards and things that had been built up, and wanting to kind of go about it their own unique way, and getting to partner with them on those journeys. And so got to work across the Bay Area with lots of different leading tech companies on their sustainability strategies. Also got to work within, BSR, an organization of, I don't know exactly its size today, but about 150 people that are working on all different dimensions of corporate responsibility and sustainability, and really, needing to stay ahead of the curve to stay relevant, right? So that organization obviously also has to kind of position itself in that way. And then shifted during my time at BSR to work outside of the tech sector, but build up our work across gender equality and women's empowerment, and then more broadly across all the different dimensions of social sustainability, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, social justice, and human rights. And yeah, took on a few other roles, as one does at smallish nonprofits, and had just a great opportunity partnering with lots of different companies on their sustainability journey, their strategies, how to deliver impact through partnership, all sorts of different dimensions and vectors of this field, which which was incredibly exciting. And, and I learned just so much. And then had this opportunity of Expedia Group come up where, I was able to take kind of all these lessons from kind of the outside, frankly, right? From the investor community's perspective, from the consulting and the kind of NGO perspective, to be able to bring all that I had learned in, those years to really design and build my own program, maybe not my own, but, on behalf of Expedia Group, and get to take all of that insight and see, how I would apply it. And really, I had learned all of the what, what is necessary, what is needed, what is kind of best in class, but I really hadn't delivered on the how. I think at BSR, I had given a lot of guidance to companies on what the how might look like. But I hadn't been in the driver's seat of delivering on that how. And that is the journey that I'm on now, is really understanding, just how this work translates across a lot of competing priorities inside of a company, how you make it resonate with individual leaders in different business units, how you bring people on board to this work, and not get so nuanced that you're just losing people in the process, but you're really just bringing others along. And, hopefully over time, how you kind of shift some of those incentives to also be aligned more in the direction that we know we all need to kind of get to. So it's been really fun, and I really have appreciated getting to look at, again, this intersection of business and society from so many different angles. I think each one unveils different challenges, different opportunities. We need all of these different groups at the table to really drive the kind of change that we want to see. And it's just each angle has taught me so much.
Oh my goodness, I can only imagine. And I do feel like for anyone who's listening and who, may be relatively new to the world of ESG as we're seeing it today, like you really were doing this work, from on the investor side before almost anyone was doing this work on the investor side. And I can only imagine too, going from that to like how exciting, like, when you started doing this work with tech companies was also such a cool moment. I say from being inside a tech company and looking at what all of our peers were doing, it was also such a cool moment to be doing sustainability and social impact work and truly creating new things that had not been done before. So it's so cool to see how you're bringing that to bear in this new role. Building this function from the ground up. I mean, I guess not fully from the ground up, but really integrating it across Expedia Group. And I'm curious, what inspired you? I mean, it's an interesting move. I have ideas of why I think it's so cool, but what inspired you to join a travel company in the middle of a global pandemic, probably the time when the least travel was happening in our lifetimes?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's lots of reasons, but maybe just to start there with what you just said. I mean, I think the absence of travel, you know, like really impacted, I think, so many of us in so many different ways, right? Just that lack of ability to kind of connect with others, the lack of ability to connect with different cultures, be able to see the world, maybe visit family, visit friends, and that absence of travel, I think, just only re-emphasized to so many of us the important role that it plays in our life, right? And so I think that is actually part of, the foundation from which we can kind of also build some of our work, right? It's a recognition of just what an important role it has for us. But I think, really personally, it was, lots of, I mean, I had spent all this time at BSR kind of looking at what makes a strong program and what doesn't. And I didn't have a real checklist, but I had a sense of, where would I go where I would know that the company was going to take these issues seriously, that they were really committed. And of course, all of that was really important factors in me making this kind of a decision. And I think through the interview process, I was able to explore all of those different dimensions. I spent a lot of time with the CEO and got a lot of, his perspective and insights about where he saw this work going. And that was all just really important kind of for me as a background to making my decision. And then I think travel, I'd heard from a lot of people. I had a lot of peers and a lot of friends working in sustainability roles within companies. And, I'd heard that, a factor to the success of you being in this role, and a factor to your kind of interest and passion in these kinds of roles is being connected to ultimately the product that the company is delivering, right? And I think you
Hmm.
don't always get to do that, and I can understand that and recognize that. But I think, I feel deeply connected to travel, and I can really get behind this idea and this vision that Expedia Group has, that travel is a force for good, that we bridge divides, that we bring people together, that we bring different cultures and experiences for people. And throughout just the 9 months that I've been at Expedia Group, I've heard about so many different transformations that individuals have experienced as a result of their first travel experience. And so it does feel like this great tool that I'm sitting behind, right? This kind of great opportunity to be able to activate for people who don't otherwise have access to it, to be able to benefit from some of these kinds of experiences that we know travel can afford the world. And so I think understanding that and being really connected to that mission was really important to me. I also think, the experience of not getting to travel, also just, reinforced the importance of it to me. And then I think, in a lot of the conversations during the interview process, I did hear about how, we were ultimately a technology company that was connecting human beings, and that was our mission, right? Like that was our objective in the world. Yes, we were tech, but we were tech that provided for individuals and human beings to make connections. And that just also speaks really deeply to me. And so kind of being able to get behind all of that made me feel really, excited about the opportunity. And now I regularly say in my role that I feel like I'm sitting behind all these like beautiful ingredients and all these really interesting pieces, and what dish we're going to make with them is just like so exciting, right? Because I think we have all these really, really interesting tools at our disposal. We have all these huge kind of global challenges that need addressing, and how we leverage those tools and those connections towards some of those global challenges is just a really exciting opportunity for me.
Well, that is so cool to hear. And that makes a lot of sense. Like, and I love the kitchen analogy of all the ingredients that you have to work with, and would love to hear a little bit more, if you're willing to share, about how the company is thinking about its role in this broader ecosystem, and what some of the key strategic priorities might be moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So totally happy to share. I think there is this idea of travel as a force for good. Again, that's, a mission statement that Expedia Group has been behind, and I think we all truly believe it. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we're taking care of the kind of impacts and that we do have as a business, and being very open-eyed about the fact that not everyone gets to benefit from these kind of amazing travel experiences that many of us have had. So I think, for us, our areas of focus, which are just kind of coming into clarity now, really are about sustainability. So, I mean, it's an existential crisis for the world, for our planet, for all of our people, and for the travel industry. There's no doubt. I mean, increasingly people are aware of the impacts of travel and their kind of individual travel decisions, but also destinations are being, upended every day. I mean, ski resorts without snow and beaches that are being eroded, and all of the multitude of dimensions and impacts of sustainability. I think there, what does Expedia Group have to offer the world is something that's really important for us to really look at our unique kind of value add in this mix. And again, we play a really important part as a convener across many different individual travel components, as I've mentioned, all the hotels, all the vacation rentals, all the airlines, etc. And how do we really partner with them to accelerate their transformation, and therefore, the transformation of the industry, I think is really important. We also play a really important role in providing travelers with awareness and insights about sustainable choices. And so a lot of people come to our websites to book travel and to shop across different travel brands. And so to be able to create a space where brands and different hotels and and airlines can compete on sustainability and what does that look like is a really exciting proposition, and to be able to just make sure that we're providing clear information and guidance to travelers on what sustainable options and choices look like is is another place that we really will be focused. Um, and then leaning into this idea of just, you know, who gets to experience travel.
Mhm.
And there's lots of data that supports, it's not everyone, right? And I think it is still um, too often that travel can be um, great experiences for many, but not for all, right? So not everyone can afford travel experiences, of course, in quite the same way. Not everyone has access to passports. There are challenges in safety for, for example, for women who are traveling alone. There's challenges in particular countries and jurisdictions for LGBTQ travelers and feeling safe in those. There's lots of challenges in particular for the disabled community and population, and getting access to really good information on accessibility features of different hotel rooms or flights, and actually building out more accessible features in these different places as well. So not everyone gets to experience travel in this kind of amazing way, and so really addressing some of the inequities in the travel system is also going to be a big focus of ours. And there, I do report into our chief inclusion and diversity officer, and so our team sits next to our IND team. There's a lot of partnership across both of our teams on this particular challenge. And then the other piece that we're also focused on, because we really want to build out a platform that um, is going to deliver for the kind of multitude of challenges that travel and tourism still faces, is really around economic advancement and inequity, and who is benefiting from the kind of wealth generation that's created within the travel economy, right? So I think there
Mhm.
used to be statistics, I don't know if they're still accurate kind of post COVID, that 1 in 10 jobs globally is connected to travel and tourism. It really does sit in every community. But are these communities that are these destinations that everyone wants to get to, are they really benefiting from the economic opportunity of travelers coming to their communities? And what can we do to help ensure that they can benefit from those? And how can we power more businesses through our travel technology platform that are serving underserved travelers, that are led by, people of color and different groups. And so how do we leverage, again, some of the tools that we have within our toolbox to deliver for these different pieces? So overall, I would say it's about access, it's about equity, and it's about sustainability are really the areas of focus for us.
Right. Well, that makes so much sense. And these are such huge questions, right? They're
Yeah,
so
yeah,
existential and so global.
yeah.
And I know that, as you think about these different areas, that having access to data and access to information is such a huge part of your ability to affect and influence change, whether that's helping travelers get the information they need to make better choices, or designing your products in a way that's going to increase equity and access. um, what's your take on, I guess, both kind of where we are now with decision useful information for travelers and consumers, and like where how we get where we would like to go?
Yeah, we're still not there, right? I think even as individuals who book travel, I think we kind of know that, but it is improving. It is dramatically improving year over year. And whereas so many industries have come around to, having worked at BSR again for all these years, we know about all sorts of different industry collaborations, which set out standards and set out expectations, and there's pros and cons of all of those kinds of things. The travel industry is just new to this space of collaboration and of working together and aligning around particular objectives. So it's very, very fresh for this industry to be able to do that. And I really do think some of the quiet of COVID for this industry, I mean, hugely disruptive to this industry, so it doesn't feel quiet, but not a lot going on. So some kind of quiet moments to reflect has allowed the industry to think about standardization, about information, and what's going out to travelers for the first time. So there's a lot that's happening, but I don't think all individual travelers have quite seen it yet. It hasn't all made its way out to the booking experience for individual travelers, for example. But a lot of it is happening on the back end. I think there's still a lot of work to do, right? Because I think there's always this balance between providing individuals with meaningful information, carbon emissions of flights, um, or data about, the impact of a particular room night, for example. But it also has to be information that travelers can understand and
Mm-hmm.
action against, right? And I think, it's that balance is still pretty tough to come across. And that's ultimately, a partnership between my team, our marketing and brands team, our product team, to be able to bring all of our minds around, this kind of need to help travelers make better decisions in this space. And I think that is, again, you'll see more of that happening over the coming years. And we are very much reliant on um, standard reporting, of course, from all of our hotel partners, standard reporting and guidance from all of the airlines, for example. And, as all of those different individual travel components start to come around particular standards, it will really help us to help travelers make kind of
Mm-hmm.
more comparable decisions as well.
Right. I mean, it's such a ripple effect. I was really
Mm-hmm.
struck the last time you and I spoke by just like, we think about the information that's being reported in, annual CSR, ESG, sustainability reports, as a moment in time, but the quality of that information also has effects on that company's customers and partners.
Yeah,
um,
totally.
and I feel like we've been like many people have been kind of beating the drum on like we need better data, we need more
I
decision useful
know.
information, and we've been working on it, but we're not there yet. So I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
totally. And I mean, Expedia Group has, we do research on traveler interest in sustainability fairly regularly. And I think, in our most recent research, it is just so much confusion is what we're hearing back, right? So
Mm,
I think travelers see green, green leaves and, planet Earth and, green, and they see eco and they see sustainable, and how, how decision useful is that to an average traveler? It's not there yet, but, I think if you look on, that's kind of a little bit of a negative take. And I think if you look on the optimistic take, everyone's trying to figure it out right now, right? So there's
mhm,
lots of different approaches being piloted, lots of kind of A/B testing of different ways in which we can get that information out. And then, on the back end, a lot of consolidation around the standards and what is important to get out. So I think all of that will continue, some of that alignment will continue. We have to make sure that the alignment, of course, drives us more and more further up to the top and not towards, kind of just too minimal set of criteria as well. So we have to keep pushing for more and more, but still more alignment. And I think, again, there's still this space that people are piloting new solutions in because we all recognize that there is this need and confusion. And some of that confusion is okay, I think, to start when we're all still working on what is the best approach. And then hopefully over time, we start to see just more clarity in this space as well.
mhm. Definitely, that makes sense. And it is exciting too that it is, while travelers, may be confused, it's clearly something that many of us want more information
Exactly.
about. Well, one thing that's come through so clearly, Aditi, in so many aspects of what you've shared today is the extent to which you are taking a partnership approach, both in the work that you're doing within Expedia Group, but also the work that you're doing within the travel industry more broadly. Um, and I'm curious if you have any advice or wisdom to share for other people who are thinking about how they can more proactively collaborate with their stakeholders, whether they're internal or external or both.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, internally, this has been the big, shift for me in this role. And, at, at Calvert, I was able to just really engage with sustainability teams with a little bit more of a hammer. As an investor in your company, we want to see you do X, Y, and Z, which is a nice place to be. At BSR, we got a lot of partnership from counterparts within companies. And then now being in this role within a company, it's reliant on a lot of partnership from across the business. And I think it is. We do speak a different language at times. We are looking at a different set of challenges, and we are looking at a different set of solutions necessary to address those challenges. So I think at times there can be, just misalignment on where we're headed. And then at other times, there can be great partnership. And I think part of exploring that kind of great partnership is really having a, a good degree of empathy and a good degree of kind of humility and trying to really put yourself in someone else's shoes. And it's funny because I was reflecting on some of this with my partner the other day, and I said something to him about putting myself into someone else's shoes, and my young 5-year-old son was like, "Mommy, you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes. What does that mean?" And it was so funny to just have that kind of reaction and kind of like, right, that's not a saying that works for a 5-year-old. That I'm thinking most of the people who are listening to this will certainly understand that saying. And it was very funny because we went on to explain to him what it meant to try to put yourself in someone else's shoes. But I think for purposes of this conversation, I think it is really about, what is the field and the discipline that this person has kind of grown up in, right? And like, what have they been oriented to in terms of success? And I think a lot of it does kind of go back to some of those incentives that I was talking about early on, because I think all of that is just a realization to me over time too. But, and it's like, if you've grown up in a hyper competitive environment, are you as inclined to collaboration? Probably not, right? Like that's what you've been kind of bred to be thinking about. If you've been thinking a lot about, dimensions around differentiation in different ways, again, are you going to be thinking about partnerships with peers as much? Probably not. So I think it's having an understanding of just the starting point for others. I think if you're working in a team that has really big kinds of boulders that you're working on kind of pushing up a hill, and you're coming out and saying like, we need to do X, Y, and Z right now, that's not going to work so well. So I think, really just having a sense of, these are the objectives that we have. These are long-term objectives, and how can we partner in the near term to build some of that into your plans? And then what does a longer-term plan look like as well? And not to take, any of it as that there's not interest, because I've only found that there's so much interest across the business in partnership. It is a matter of sequencing. It's a matter of prioritization. And then there is some ultimately conviction that I think you have to have in these roles as to the way in which some of this work does need to get done as well, and be a little bit unapologetic about that kind of conviction
Mm-hmm.
as well, because I think it's really important, because this function has a risk of falling by the wayside um, without that kind of commitment to it as well. So I think, lots of different lessons that I've learned in terms of partnership internally. I think partnership externally comes a lot, more naturally to me. I've been working in this space of B2B collaborations for a long time. And I mean, I think, we in this field, we inherently get it. We're not going to get there alone, right? I think it's great though. I think it's still great to compete too. I think it's great to be able to show the industry what's possible, show, our travelers and our customers what's possible to continue to move the needle forward, and then collaborate on the parts that where we need standardization, where we need common approaches, where we need to collectively push the rest of the industry to move forward. Having common messages in all of those areas are really, really important. I think alignment across the industry around what we're working towards, all of that really important, and finding those kinds of partnership opportunities, I think come much more naturally to me, are new to the travel industry. I keep hearing that it's a very competitive industry and one that hasn't really worked together much previously. And that is just new to me, because that's not, the way that I've partnered in the past. And so I haven't had that experience. Thankfully, I think I'm joining the industry at a time where it's very much open to collaboration and partnership. If anything, with many of our hotel and air partners, there's so much enthusiasm about partnering on sustainability, which has just been great, because there's so much more that we can achieve together. But there has been a lot of learning for me on those internal partnerships, setting out those expectations, working on incentives together, and then hopefully over time building in these metrics that, make it meaningful, that we're working towards dual objectives. We're not working
Mm-hmm.
towards just my objective or just your objective, but we're working towards both of these objectives, and we can do both at the same time.
Right, absolutely. That makes so much sense. I think it's really so underappreciated the extent to which being effective in these roles is really about creating shared incentives so that
Yeah.
you are aligned and rowing in the same direction, for lack of a better metaphor. Well, I mean, I could talk to you forever. I would love to. I do want to ask just a couple more questions while I have you here, even though I feel like I could ask you 100. Changing topics a little bit. I mean, and actually not, because I do think leading through collaboration, leading through partnership, appreciating that we can't get there alone, to me are such key tenets of feminine leadership, and how I think of feminine leadership. But I know that you've done a ton of work on women's empowerment. I know that you've been in leadership roles for a long time, and I'm curious, what's your take on what we need to do to get more women into positions of power? And how would you define feminine leadership, or what does that phrase mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things that you described in your opening, let's just to start with the last question first. I think are definitely tenets of feminine leadership in my mind as well. And I think the more that we appreciate that those are critically needed in workplaces today, and to be able to be successful in workplaces today, I think really helps accelerate the first part of the question as well. But I think, to me, it is about, yep, that collaborative spirit, and then that inclusive component, of course, as well. And I'm really intentional about that with my teams that I lead. If you're on my team, you're definitely there for a purpose, and I really want to hear from you. I really appreciate points of view. I regularly will lean on all of my team for their input into different decisions, and bring in their points of view into whatever kind of decision that I'm making. And so that's really important to me as well. I mean, in today's world, just, coming out of, I don't know if we can say that, but in the midst still of a pandemic and all the multitude of challenges that we're facing, I think just also it just means leading as a human, right? Like being really open to, um, our humanity, and the way that we are just people ourselves, and we're going to make mistakes. We're going to kind of do our best, and having those kinds of expectations for our team as well, right? Like it's okay, and we all are kind of in this together, and so really working with those cooperative kind of elements are really important to me. I think, on the change for women, I mean, this is just like, yeah, it's been so much of what I've dedicated my career to. Again, out of graduate school, when um, what really got me going personally was knowing the disparities, right? Like, I don't think at any point prior to my MBA experience, I really knew the data around the lack of women in leadership. I really appreciated the data. I don't think I just maybe just never saw it. And so I just never really understood. But then as soon as I knew, I had to do something about it, right? So I
Hmm.
think I heard during my MBA career, like, women never ask for raises, or never negotiate their salaries, and probably ask for raises too. I don't know. And for me, that meant, like, it didn't matter what salary I was being offered, I was going to negotiate my salary because I just wanted to not be. And that is just like, that is, a bit of a spirit that burns within me. And that was just, the way that I wanted to address it. But I think when we look at wider solutions, we can't look to those kinds of solutions, right? Like, I definitely do not think that the solution is getting lots of women to change what they're doing. And I do think the solutions are more structural. Those are just much more complex to address, as we all know. I mean, that means the changes in laws that we need to see. That means the changes in workplace policies, like all of the things, all of the work that's being done, all of it is moving us in the right direction. It will take time. I think the parts that are, harder to track and are probably equally important are really those shifts in norms, in cultural norms, and stereotypes, and how we think about women's roles, and what we're teaching girls about their roles, what we're teaching boys about girls' roles, how we're talking about all of these things, the kind of, behaviors that are being modeled in workplaces permeate within, communities, the kinds of, behaviors that are being role modeled in families permeate to children. And so all of those things, I mean, all of it has a huge impact in the status of how women are showing up in society. And so we need to keep pushing on all fronts. I myself am raising two boys who are regularly schooled on the role, and the fact there are no limitations to the role of women across society, and they see it role models in our household, and I think that that's even more important than anything else. And so unfortunately or fortunately, I mean, I guess on the unfortunate side there's not one single answer, and then on the fortunate side, we all have a role to play, right? And we all have a piece of this to be able to address in whatever space we're sitting in. And so there's a lot to do. At times I think when you're just looking at the data, you can feel like, there is such, I mean, I think I've written the term glacial pace of change so many times. And every time I would write a blog about gender equality, it would always just start with this kind of like, negative sentiments on on the change, and it is tough because I think if you just look at the data, it is tough. I hope no matter where each of us are, we can find a piece for ourselves to be able to do, because it's really at the intersection of all of these different pieces that change really needs to happen.
Mm, no, I love the framing because it really is something that and I think both, you know, getting more women into positions of power and like, changing how we think about leadership and coming back to like sustainability, like these are two huge things.
Yeah.
But we are all empowered to play our role in addressing them, and I think that can be so daunting, but it can also be so liberating of like you don't need the job title to work on
Hmm.
this. Like we all get to show
Hmm.
up to work on this kind of however, like whatever work is ours to do. um
Absolutely.
we don't need someone to
Absolutely.
give us permission.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, that's in how you're voting in elections. It's how you're engaging as a citizen. It's your role as like a parent, if you are, your role as an employee or a leader or a manager. It's like your role in all sorts of different places. You're getting to have an impact in this space for sure.
Absolutely. Well, the last thing I want to ask, and I ask this to everyone, I have a not at all secret vision that one day I'm going to have a deck of inspirational post-it notes that are pre-populated with people's favorite reminders. And so if you got an Aditi post-it note with a reminder for women changing the world out there, what would you want to write on it?
I think I would want to write just to be brave, and I
Mm,
think what's really important for me is that we're not apologetic about this work, right? It's not secondary, it's not less important, it's not on the sidelines. It is central to what, like, everything that is needed. And I think, we all just have to have that kind of confidence and that mindset to like make this happen and make the kinds of changes that we need to see happen.
I love that. I feel like so many of the messages recently have been in that same vein,
Mm-hmm.
and it does take so much, it can take courage, right, to
Mm-hmm.
birth the new and to do things that haven't been done before, but we need it. we,
Yeah, we need it. And we need the conviction that we know that it's the right thing, right? Like we don't, even if it's kind of pushing in a direction that not everyone is thrilled to hear, or, means that we have to do things a little bit differently, it's necessary. And we need our voices full of conviction at the table with confidence that it's the right thing to do, um, and that we can do it, right? Like we all are capable of doing hard things, and we have to face the challenges that we know are out there. And if we don't face them, nothing's going to change. But we have to do it with the kind of conviction that we know we can make an impact.
mm, it reminds me that framing is so powerful. It reminds me of at some point I read and processed that like it was not my job for everyone to like me.
Yeah.
And that if everyone liked me, I probably wasn't doing my job.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can totally see that. I can very much appreciate that.
Amazing. Well, I love it. And friendly reminder to anyone who's listening, if you're ruffling some feathers, we need you too.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Aditi, this has been such a treat. Again, I feel like there's so much, we barely scratched the
I
surface, so
know.
there's so much more to talk about, hopefully in the future. And in the meantime, where can people find or keep in touch with you or learn more about the very cool work that you are doing at Expedia Group?
Yeah, I would say, LinkedIn is probably the best place. So please do look me up on LinkedIn, and I'm sure Liz can share, my LinkedIn handle and connect with me there. I'd love to be able to stay in touch and, share or answer any questions that you might have.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll definitely include a link to that in the show notes.
Awesome.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for making time. This has been such a treat. I love that we covered everything from incentives to globetrotting to feminine
it
leadership, and just so appreciate you taking the time, Aditi.
was such a pleasure for me. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the Women Changing the World podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is liz.best, that's lis.best, or you can find me on LinkedIn by searching my name, Liz Best. Join my mail list by visiting elizabethbest.com/monthly meditation, and you'll receive all the latest updates on events, retreats, and opportunities to work with me, plus a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch, and I'll see you in the next episode.